Parrot TV, the voice for humanity.
Hi, welcome to the New York Parrot Literary Corner. I'm Dustin Pickering, your host. Today we have Ruth Kozak, who is a Canadian travel journalist and writer with a strong interest in history and archaeology. A frequent traveler, Ruth lived for several years in Greece and instructs classes in travel journalism and creative writing. A travel writer since 1982, she is a regular contributor to Europe Up Close. Until 2020, she published her own online travel zine at travelthroughhistory.com. Her publications include articles in APA Insight Guides 1994, Writers Abroad Anthology Foreign Flavors, as well as in 3 poetry anthologies. And she was a writer for the Vancouver Guide for Planet Eye Travel. Her Athens and Beyond ebook for Hunter Publishing US was published November 2015 on Kindle. She is the past president of the BC Association of Travel Writers. Ruth's first historical fiction novel, Shadow of the Lion, Blood on the Moon, Volume 1, was published in July 2014 by mediaria.cdm.com UK. Volume 2, Blood on the Moon, The Fields of Hades, was published in January 2017. Those are her first published literary works. Research was done in Greece and with the help of Vancouver Greek Consul, the Ministry of Culture, Greece, and the Society of Macedonian Studies, Thessalonica, as well as help from various classical scholars and the Finnish Institute and Norwegian Institutes of Athens. A full version of Shadow of the Lion is available on Amazon Kindle. Her book of poetry, Songs for Erato, Poems Written in Greece, is published on Amazon.com and Kindle. She is currently working on another historical novel, Dragons in the Sky, a story that connects the Celts and the Greeks set in the 3rd century BC. Thanks for joining us today, Ruth. How are you?
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really happy to be
here.
here.
To have an exciting conversation. We have an excellent platform, and I'm hoping we offer some great insights into your writing. So my first question is, where does your interest in archaeology and history begin, and how does it inform your writing?
Well, actually, I guess I started writing plays and things when I was about between 9 and 12 years old. And then at the age of 12, we traveled from Eastern Canada to Western Canada, and I got really interested in the pioneers and the First Nations people. And also because my father was a pastor, I was very interested in anything to do with the Romans and Palestine and that part of the world. So that stirred the thing, but it wasn't until when I was 16 in high school and I learned about Alexander the Great, and that really set me off on my journey.
Interesting. So this, your historical fiction, The Shadow of the Lion, it sounds like a very fascinating work. So how does a writer craft a historical character? Is there challenges compared to something that you would create out of pure imagination?
Well, one thing, you have to be prepared for an awful lot of research. And because Shadow of the Lion is based on true events and true characters, although I had to insert some fictional characters in there to balance it out. But I had that interest in Alexander. The first book that I was going to write was about his little known son who was killed when he was 14. He was the only legal heir of Alexander. And I started writing that, but then I felt this story is too political. It's not going to work as a young adult novel. So I was advised to start over. And so in 1993, I decided to start over, and that's when the Greek consulate heard about it and offered to send me back to Greece to do more research. And from there on, I was working on the book, and then when I came back here, I was also working in a daycare center. Took me altogether 15 years to put that novel together and get it right. And so there was an awful lot of work, and there was a lot of on-site research as well as help from the other places that were mentioned who were very helpful to me.
So how true must a historical fiction be? And can you take some liberties in creating, you said you created a few characters yourself to balance it?
Yes. For instance, my current novel, Dragons in the Sky, I actually got the idea for it when I first first time I went to visit Greece in 1979. And how it started was people were always saying to me, how do you know so much about Greece when you had never been there? And then when I got there, I had all these deja vu experiences. And I thought, how did a person from a Celtic background know all these things? And I got the idea for this girl, this Celtic girl, who ends up being kidnapped by a warrior and then later rescued by this young hunter who turns out to be Alexander the Great. So I connect fiction with the history in that there are 2 or 3 actual historical events happen within the story, but the rest of it is fiction built around those events.
That's interesting. So when you traveled to Greece, did you learn anything new that you hadn't actually already knew from reading about it?
Oh yeah, many, many things. I went and visited so many of the sites. I spent quite a bit of time up in northern Greece in Macedonia, where Alexander grew up. I went to the site of Mysa, the school that he attended with Aristotle. I did some travel in Turkey to some of the sites like Ephesus and things. Part of my story takes place in the building of the new Alexandria in Egypt. And I had really wished that I could have gone there, but it wasn't until 2014 when my book was accepted that the Egyptian tourism offered me a free trip to go. And so I finally went to Egypt. And because of my book, they allowed me a special side trip to go to Alexandria. So that was one of the big thrills. But that happened after the book was already written.
Interesting. So they offered you to come in and to do research specifically?
No, they were offering, it was right at a time when there was a lot of problems in Egypt and they wanted to encourage some tourism. So they had invited a whole lot of travel journalists to go. And out of the lot of us from Canada that went, there were only 5 people accepted the offer. So it was like amazing because it was all paid for. And then, like I say, we went, we saw the usual sites and we went to the Red Sea, but because they knew about my book, they sent me on a special trip to Alexandria.
Oh, interesting. So they helped out quite a bit.
Yes, it was amazing.
So that must have been a really exciting opportunity. And I'm curious, when did you start travel journalism and why did you start a travel blog?
Well, right from high school, because I always was wanting to be a writer. So right from high school, I went to work for the editorial of the Vancouver Sun newspaper. My intention then was I wanted to be an investigative journalist, and particularly I was interested in covering a lot of the crime stuff that was going on in the city at the time. But I was this 18-year-old preacher's kid, so they stuck me in the news library instead. But I had that basics of journalism. So when I started traveling to Greece in 1979, I thought, why not put that journalism to work? So in I think it was 82 when I published my first travel article, and that set me off. From then on, I was doing travel writing.
So it was sort of clash of chance, sort of like events just kind of pushed you forward towards that. Interesting. I'm sure it's been very fulfilling as well. If you had moments in your travels where you felt very inspired, that
definitely. And I absolutely love Greece so much. It's my second home. I just feel so connected to that country.
I'm sure you're familiar with Edith Hamilton.
Yes, but not a whole lot. My main source for the inspiration was Mary Reynolds' books. She really inspired me. And when I was writing Shadow of the Lion, I had to be very, very careful not to copy her style because I was reading so much of her stuff. Yeah.
That's interesting. I think that Harold Bloom used the phrase "anxiety of influence." It's kind of hard to be a writer sometimes when you read a lot and you kind of get drawn into somebody else's world, not to take their talent,
That's right.
So obviously this is, yeah, I guess this would be a matter of opinion to this question. But of course you're more knowledgeable than the majority of people on this. What, in your opinion, led to Alexander's hubris, and what made him so ambitious?
Well, of course, he inherited the throne from his father when he was only 19 years old. His father had already organized a campaign against the Persians, who were taking over all of the western coast of Asia Minor there. And so he set off with these big aspirations, but he wasn't going to stop at just chasing them out of Ionia, Greek. The Egyptians wanted him to come there to help them get rid of the Persians, and he just kept on going until finally he died at the age of 33 under dubious circumstances.
That's interesting. It's fascinating because it seems like it's historical circumstances that created his ambitions and his desires, and how he acted as far as empire and militaristically. He's a very contradictory figure historically, and I wonder what kind of contradictions of character do you find in him as reading about him and learning about him?
Well, at first, you see, when he was studying, when he was a young boy, when he was in his mid-teens, he was studying with Aristotle, and he was very interested in philosophy and medicine and stuff like that. But then when the opportunity came to become this warrior, then he was all going for that. I think one of his downfalls was, of course, when they were on the road traveling right as far as India. They would have kept on going to China, I'm sure, if he could have. But there was a lot of drinking going on. There was malaria. He had quite a few numbers of serious wounds and things like that. And my feeling is that he was just kind of mentally losing it somewhere along the way there with all this stuff. It was a huge amount of pressure, plus all the drinking. And then his best friend and lover had also died, and that sort of sent him over the edge.
Interesting. So how does your life in Greece inspire your writings?
How did my life in Greece there inspire it? Well, I think I was inspired before I went, but one of the situations that really got me was when I landed in Athens. I came out of my little hotel room and I thought, just let my feet take me where they are meant to go. And I walked down the street and around the corner, and suddenly I was in the Agora. And when I entered the Agora, I could suddenly see it exactly as it had been. It was like a veil dropped from my eyes. And that was the most outstanding deja vu feeling that I had when I was there. I felt that's what made the connection. I felt I've been here before. I know this. And I had that type of thing happen several times during my travels around Greece. I felt this real.
Did you write a lot while you were traveling as well?
Yeah. And I keep a lot of journals when I'm traveling. I mean, not carrying a laptop with me. I carry a tablet, but I make a lot of journal notes and things. Yes.
It's interesting. And of course you write about it on your blog. And so where is your blog again? Can you tell the viewers where that is?
I have several blogs. It's one is inalexandersfootsteps.com. And then there's one that's www.shadowofthelion.com. That's about the book. And then there's another general one that connects with other things, and that's www.ruthkozak, KOZAK.com. Also, I wanted to tell you about my connection with my new novel, how I got connected with that.
Okay.
My father is Welsh, so I have this Welsh connection, strong Welsh connection, and so the character in my novel is from a Welsh tribe, the Silures. And anyway, one day I was visiting around, and I go to, every time I go to Greece, I also go to London and Wales. So I was in Salisbury, England, and I saw a sign on the bus depot thing saying that there was an Iron Age hill fort just outside of the town. So this is when the story of of dragons was just in my head. So I decided to walk out there. It was about 4 kilometers. I walked out, and as soon as I got to this place where this hill fort was, I had another one of those deja vu feelings. This is the place where my story started. So then I started doing a lot of research, that there had been Iron Age hill forts there going back centuries. So that's the site where my Dragons in the Sky starts, in the area of Old Sarum, England, and then it goes across.
Interesting. It must have been really fascinating to be sort of in the moment in these places of great importance.
I felt a really strong connections to these
Yeah,
places.
that must have been exciting too, like to be in part of the that moment where it's like you're experiencing a living history. So when did you start seeing yourself as a creative writer, and what does the creative writing mean to you?
Well, as I said, I started writing when I was about 8 or 9. Mostly it was plays. In 1953, when I was working in the newspaper, interested in being a crime reporter, there was a big problem with drugs in Vancouver. So I wrote a play called The Street, which was based partly on the truth. And so I wanted to be a playwright, but then I got sidetracked with all these other things in history, and then I learned about Alexander, and that was that. So anyway, later on, actually, that play was rewritten, and in 2000 it was produced in Vancouver very successfully. And then combined with my travel, my traveling and my historical writing, I also, in the early 90s, I wanted to write a play about the lyric poet Sappho. So I started writing that, but then I realized I had too many things going. I had Shadow of the Lion going, I had the play going, and then my travel writing. So I put that play aside. It still needs to have one more act written on it to finish it. But there was always this deep connection with the past. Like, I was brought up on the prairies as a small child. I was so interested in the First Nations people. I at first, when I was younger, when I was before 12 years old, I was writing a lot of stories about them, about the pioneers and the connection with them and the First Nations people. So it just seemed to be as if it was inborn in me, this interest in the historical stuff. And also the adventures. I always was a very adventurous child, which gave my parents gray hair before their time, because I was always off on some kind of mad adventure from the time I could walk.
It's fun though, you have to be kind of open to things, but to learn a lot about the world, and to kind of develop a openness to experience. It makes you a little more of a better writer, I think, too, because you can write more on those experiences. So do you have any poems to share with us?
A poem? I have a poem. I have from my songs for Errado. I couldn't decide which one I would read, but I'll read one. This is about the street where I used to live, on Virano Street in Plata. I have very fond memories of this street. And so now, but the place where I used to live is now boarded up. So it's very nostalgic. The ghost of Virano Street. I walk past 14 Viranos, touch the gate, recall my life there. Kyriadina's scarlet geraniums, the little spitaki in the courtyard occupied by writers, artists. Robbie sipping Cressy, expounding on his life as an Argentine exile. So much flotsam tossed on Aegean shores. At the dirty corner, named because of the dust of the excavation, stands the tripod monument of Lysistrates, won by a chorus at the Dionysus Theater. when this was ancient Athens theater district. Poets lived here, Byron, Shelley. Viranos is Byron's street. This is where we lived the Greek Zoe. This is where we bared our passions to the passers-by. Dramas were enacted on this corner. Relationships begun and ended. Once I threw a wine glass at Mutiu, missed. On winter nights, we sat inside the milk shop, huddled around a heater sipping Metaxa brandy. The Katharine Hepburn of the corner and her manic Canadian boyfriend, Mary Rogers, the faded debutante, always with a bottle of vodka in her handbag and an entourage of toy boys in tow. Robbie, my soulmate, telling stories about his beloved Buenos Aires. We shared our lives on that corner, knew each other's secrets and sorrows. Now the milk shop's a ritzy cafe bar. The dust of the excavation swept away, along with the memories. Old friends have disappeared, left for other places, some taken too soon, yet their spirits linger still. I wonder if the tourists who sit here sipping frappe and wine know this corner's history. Can they feel the presence of the ghosts? When I pass the corner, I hear echoes of voices pass, sought by Kyriadina's iron gate, wishing it would open again to let me into the sunny courtyard and find Robbie at his easel waiting to hear my day's adventures. Last night, as I walked out of Virano Street across the Areopagitu, I saw him, Robbie, walking in his slow amble toward me. I recognized his center frame, the gray ponytail and beard. He looked up, caught my eyes. As I passed, I heard him say in his mischievous way, misbehave. Then, like a shadow, he was gone. So many memories on Virano Street and that little corner of Plata. Yes, the ghosts are there. I see them, feel their presence, hear their laughter as I pass by.
That's interesting. And you make a contrast between, your view of the street and maybe possible the people that are there that maybe not as conscious of what has happened in this area. So that's very fascinating. I mean, it's interesting to see how you contrast the yourself relation to other people who are, present, and how they may not be as conscious of the history there.
Yes, I mean, there's so much history. Not only was it the ancient theater district, but the fact that Lord Byron stayed in a place right on the corner, which was kind of like a little monastery thing or something. And then around the corner was a street called Shelley Street, because Shelley used to visit him there as well. I mean, I think a lot of the tourists, they're not aware of this history there.
Right. I guess, a lot of people aren't really familiar with literary history as much as they are. As a travel journalist and creative writer, how are the living conditions in other different parts of the globe have affected your perception about life and the human race generally?
I'm not quite exactly sure what you mean, but the living conditions?
Like the situation, like, the differing cultures and like, some places maybe not as advanced as the Western world,
So far pretty well. I've been to quite a few places. I've been to Malaysia and I've been to Chile. I've been to Cuba, and I loved Cuba. I was only there for a weekend or so. I went for a jazz festival, but I just loved it. And it's a shame that it's closed up because it's another place with so much history. I don't know, even when I went to Egypt, I mean, it was wonderful. The people were wonderful. It's Alexandria is the most amazing city. It's fabulous. And same thing when I've traveled around Turkey. I'm not very happy with what's going on there now with Erdogan, but the people themselves are wonderful people, and I've been there many times. So I didn't find, and I've never sort of gone to a place where I found it to be a lot of squalor. I've never really had a desire to go to India. I don't know, a lot of people love going there, but it's not on my thing. But yeah, the other places I've been, like when I went to Malaysia, I won that trip and it was wonderful. Again, the people were just great. You don't know what to expect when you're going into a Muslim place, but the people are very respectful and kind. And I mean, you're expected to be respectful of them. You don't go around flaunting yourself in shorts when you know that's against the rules there. And I've
Right.
always found the people to be very warm and accepting.
I've heard Egyptians are especially very hospitable people.
Oh yeah, very, very hospitable.
So how have your experiences in those countries affected your own lifestyle and creative writings?
Well, I don't know. I think probably because it's opened up my eyes a lot more to what's going on in the world. So I have a broader concept of some of that stuff. And also I've met people from some of the other countries and talked to them about, where they came from and things like that. And so I kind of, I've between that and all the research I've done, I kind of get the gist of what's going on places. Yeah.
Hmm. So you also done organizing and promoting of your work. So how does a writer go about organizing a workshop? I'm curious about that.
Well, I do a lot of readings, and quite often when I'm doing a reading, they'll ask me to do a workshop on something too, like how to write historical fiction or blah, blah, blah. And then we have a very, very good community where I live in New Westminster, BC, called the Royal City Literary Arts. And they put some very good things on. And they've asked me many, many times to come and do workshops for them on various aspects of writing. The Travel Writers Association has asked me on a couple of occasions to do workshops on the basics of travel writing. And of course, all the last while with COVID, all that's over, right? Excepting that I did a Zoom workshop for the RCLAS a couple of weeks ago. I did a Zoom workshop on it was called Setting the Stage, the 8 basic things for if you want to start writing a novel or a memoir, the things that you need to know before you start. And that went over quite well on Zoom. So I'm hoping that as long as we have to keep using Zoom, it seems to be working. I'm doing all my travel writing classes on Zoom right now, and that seems to be working as well.
So what other ways do you find successfully promoting your book? As far as like when you were able to be out, I mean, did you go to bookstores, libraries?
The library for sure was very good. And every year they have this special thing where they invite the writers. They've got my books in their library and they invite you every year to come and you can set up a table with all your stuff and advertise it. I don't know if they'll be doing that this year yet. I'm not sure. Things are still closed up here. But the problem with my novel is that because of Brexit, it was a British publisher. Because of Brexit and because of COVID, my publisher has now gone out of business.
Right.
So I had the ebook rights, so that's why I put the ebook up, because when I was traveling also, the books were in a hardcover. And every time I go to Greece, I do readings at the Athens Community School to grade 9 children. I do readings at the Athens Center. I do readings at the Canadian Institute there. And people are there from outside of Greece and wanting to know where to get the book. Well, the book is heavy for carrying around. I felt it should have been put in a soft cover. The reason he published in 2 volumes, because it's a very long novel. So he broke it into 2. So now here I am wondering, there's still books available on Amazon, but I think the first volume is running low. What do I do next? Do I spend a whole bunch of time trying to find another publisher to pick it up? Or do I redo it, self-publish it? Which I'm seriously considering doing because I don't have 4 or 5 years looking for a new publisher for my book, because I'm a lot older than I may look. But it's kind of, this was very disappointing when this happened, because Shadow of the Lion really got fabulous reviews. I had three well-known writers, Stephen Pressfield, Jack Dempsey, who's an authority on the Minoans. He's originally from Boston. He lives in Crete now. And another writer from the southern states, Scott Oden. They were my backers. And Scott wrote the whole introduction to the second novel of Shadow of the Lion, Fields of Hades. So I had a lot of backup from them, and the reviews for it were going really good. And but what do I do now? I have to do most of my own advertising. I'm always putting stuff up on Facebook and things like that about the novel, but I'm not quite sure what's going to happen now that the publisher's gone out of business.
Right.
It's
Yeah. As I'm a publisher myself, I
Yeah.
have Transcendent Zero Press, and I know that there's been some struggles with, especially financially, with, we're just not able to do as much promotion. It's harder to sell the books. People have less money. It's really been a tough period right now as far as
Yes.
the economic side. We're barely staying afloat. I mean, we're just like right on the surface there. So do you have maybe read an excerpt from your novel if you have it available?
Yeah, I have one short one from the first chapter. Just one sec. This is just the end part of the first chapter. I don't think it's too long. No. The news of Alexander's death rippled through the country like a shockwave. All day the great blue gates were left open to let mourners pass freely into the city. Even as evening approached, grieving men, their hair sheared and faces smudged with ashes, struggled along the broad streets weeping. An eerie silence prevailed throughout the city, broken only by the constant soughing of the wind as it whirled through the vacant avenues. As the two men on horseback rode down the processional way, their shadows crossed the red and yellow lions that adorned the high walls. The elder, a man in his 30s, a stranger to Babylon, wore the rough homespun of a Macedonian Highlander. He had a stocky build, his russet-colored beard neatly trimmed and cut square across his chin. His freckled, sunburned skin was smeared with ash, disguising his features. His companion, a youth of perhaps 18, slim and handsome, his auburn hair cropped to a stubble and his fine-boned face smudged with soot, wore the maroon mantle and crisp white tunic of a royal page. Except for the sheathed dagger carried by the elder man, neither were heavily armed. Both rode tall Nisaean horses with silver trappings. As he approached the Ishtar gate, the watchman lifted one eye sleepily to inspect them. He took them to be messengers on their way south to relay the news of the royal death to the battalions stationed at the king's summer palace in Susa. There'd been a stream of envoys passing through the gates all day. The royal road of Persia stretched from Babylonia to Macedon and was a network of stage posts with silent couriers that sped as swift as birds by horse and dromedary, relaying the news throughout the land. The watchman did not question the two travelers and went back to his dreaming. The horsemen rode out past the tall brass gates with their guarding bulls and dragons, and were soon lost in a swirl of sand. By the Queen's Bridge, the young man reined his horse and looked back at the city. The imposing ziggurat of Bel towered above the buttress walls, sunlight glinting from its golden ornaments. The crumbling blue-tiled temple of Marduk on its topmost tier looked oddly bleak and deserted. The Magi doused the sacred flame in the fire altar, the youth said, shading his eyes against the glare of the setting sun. It's their custom when a king dies, replied the other man bluntly. The youth's voice cracked with emotion. Alexander was greater than all their kings. Alexander was a man gone mad, exhorted the other. The wind muffled the sound of his derisive laughter. There will be rejoicing in Athens when the Peripatetics hear the news. They've long wanted revenge for Callisthenes' execution. Now they have it. The cadet wiped his hand across his eyes. If it's true that Alexander was born of the god, then the gods will punish us. Alexander was not immortal, cursed his companion. Death was the price he paid for his ambition. The harsh wailing of trumpets began to sound, echoing from the four corners of the city walls. The horses whinnied restlessly. We should have stayed until after the rites, whimpered the man. We cannot go back now, or all will be lost, hissed the elder, quieting his horse. The youth drew his hood over his close-cropped hair as the wind hurled a cloud of stinging sand into his face. Surely they will know. I'm his cupbearer. We can never go back, retorted the other man angrily. But it was I who passed the cup to him, cried the youth. Be quiet, you fool, snapped the elder. There's no reason for anyone to suspect you. Alexander had swamp fever. He'd been sick with it since he left India. Listen to me. We'll be halfway to the coast before they even notice we're absent. He pulled the corner of his mantle across his face as a breath of wind from the burning hot drift sand struck him like a flame. It's good we're traveling now while the sun is setting. The night will be cool. The youth fumbled with his reins nervously, giving an anxious glance back over his shoulder. General Perdiccas has given command of the army. He may send his men after us. We did nothing, the elder man snarled. Remember that. The blaring of the long trumpets was louder now, and with it came the sound of clashing cymbals. They wheeled their horses and rode away in silence, the sounds of the dirge fading behind them. Finally, as if to reassure himself, the youth said, at least now our father can be king of Macedon. For all these years he's been regent. At last he'll wear the crown. The older man shot a contemptuous look across at his young companion. You're a fool, Iolaus, if you believe that. Father will be true to the royalty till the day he dies. Then why, cried the youth, if not for our father's honor, why did we do it? For the Peripatetics, said the elder, for Aristotle to avenge his nephew's execution, for Callisthenes, whose death was unjustified, and for all the others, the loyal generals and friends, who died because they dared to question a madman's dream. The young cadet began to sob. You did it because you hated him, because Alexander left you in Macedon with only a small garrison to command, while all the others won the honor and glory. Be quiet, Iolaus, shouted the elder. Alexander drank dirty water, that's all. He died of swamp fever. He patted his hand over the pouch he carried on his belt. See here, I still have more inside this mule's hoof. Water from the river Styx, Aristotle's special brew. Take care, you'll taste it too. He whipped his horse into a fast gallop and was soon far ahead, engulfed in a cloud of dust. The young man stayed a while, looking back at the darkening sky. Faintly in the distance, he heard the clashing and wailing from the city walls. Suddenly, there was an ominous pause in which there was no sound at all. Then, as if there was a calm before the earthquake, the wind stilled. The young man began to tremble. Over the eastern horizon, the moon was rising, a bright cloud of scarlet drifting over the Babylonian wheat fields. Oh, Father Zeus, he wept, look, there's blood on the moon. Surely it's an omen that marks our destiny.
I have
Then
to
the
interrupt you
tears
there and
streamed down his
apologize for that because we were coming up on the end of the
Yeah.
show. We've got about a minute left, so I'm gonna have to close out. But thank you so much for joining us. It's been a wonderful talk, and I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate our viewers out there as well. This is the best and only show for creative minds. We're giving everyone a platform out there, regardless of what state in the craft you're in. The Parrot Literary Corner will give you a voice. And just get in contact with us by Literary Corner at newyorkparrot.com. And that's where you find us there. And you can give us some donations at paypal.me/nyparrot. Please grab a copy of Ruth's book. It sounds so fascinating and interesting. You can get it on Amazon and check out her blogs and her various sites and travel sites. And thank you again, Ruth, for joining us. And thanks to our viewers for being a part of the show. Please subscribe if you have not already and tell others to subscribe. Again, we are the best and only show giving this platform to creative minds.
Thank you so
This is
much
New
for
York Parrot.
inviting me. Thank
You're
you.
very welcome. It was a pleasure talking with you.